What's up, metal and heavy music fans? These are the best deathcore albums as per Howard of Within Destruction.
What's up, everyone? I'm Howard, and I play guitar for the band Within Destruction. And yeah, let's jump right into it. My top deathcore albums. So, I think the first one for me, these aren't really in a specific, this is the top, this is the bottom. It's just all kind of a broad general, like these are the albums that I love. First of all would be Emmure, Take a Look at Yourself. I'm a super huge fan of low tunings, especially when it comes to something that's groovy and something that just, really sends it when it comes to breakdowns. So I think this is the first album that Josh Travis was in. And I've known about Josh Travis before he joined the band, being Glass Cloud, Tony Danza, Tap Dance Extravaganza. Yeah. And I've always really enjoyed his playing. Just, it's not even... like, he doesn't even tune his guitar how a normal person would tune it, it's not like a E standard or like a drop tuning that's like a cohesive, every string's a specific step from each other. He just tunes it however the fuck he wants. And that for me is insane because you can't really approach the instrument in the traditional way. So you really have to be creative. And he's kind of known for that more dissonant, stuff with dissonant tapping, a lot of whammy stuff, just a lot of weird things that come into guitar playing. And, when he joined Emmure, Emmure, don't get me wrong, Emmure was always a great band. I think they're like one of the top in terms of the genre. But when he joined the band, it really solidified how Emmure is within the whole scene. He just kind of brought his sound into the band without really changing it. Without really changing the core of the band, like the attitude of the band, and just the overall, this is Emmure, this is it. So yeah, the whole album, aside from guitar work, it's just so raw and so gritty. There's just so much anger and aggression. And that's what I really love about this album.
Yeah, I was jamming some of your picks too, like a little bit before today, just to kind of refresh my memory on some of them. Because I don't listen to a ton of Emmure, but yeah, like the aggression on here is just ridiculous. And I also love Josh, the drummer's work with Darko lately. They've just been like absolutely killing it. That's one of my like most exciting kind of newer projects right now. I was also curious too, like listening to some of the tracks on here, particularly like Shinjuku Masterlord. I was wondering, like, did that stuff like that have an influence on yokai? Because I feel like there's like a shared DNA on some of that with some of like the rapping and some of the guitar work and just like how that track is put together. It's just something that I was wondering.
Yeah, man, for sure. I think that album and just Emmure in general is such a groove oriented, there's such a focus on rhythm and groove. And in terms of technicality, there isn't really that much focus when it comes to like parts that are more groovy on, making something as technical as the band previously did. So sometimes, what Emmure really influenced me to do is to just make it so that it just grooves. Like it doesn't matter. It could be just this whole section of just chugs and zeros, but dude, who cares? As the way that I think about it is like, as long as people are vibing with it and it's heavy, like it's all good. Like Emmure for me is like really important because it just allowed me to just kind of take a step back and just remind myself that you don't necessarily have to be the most technical guitar player or songwriter to make something that really has an impact. So yeah, you're definitely right. I would say that Emmure has a big part in the yokai writing process. And in terms of just influencing the overall direction and, style. My next pick is the Acacia Strain. again, kind of along the same lines of just something that's really rhythmic and, not too technically insane. Just a band that really goes, develops hooks and memorable parts just through the rhythm itself. A lot of the band's discography and the sections that really do stand out, it's really just, a memorable rhythmic hook. I think for me, like Beast from that album, Hills Have Eyes from that album are just really standout tracks that, when you think about what parts of the songs that are really stand out, it's just the parts that are super simple and that are super heavy. Yeah, Vincent's a great vocalist.
Totally.
The guitar work on that album, I mean, I know they changed. I think they had different guitars back then, but the overall style is just so significant within the genre. Yeah, they've been an insane band.
Yeah.
I've seen them in the States before, and I chipped my tooth stage diving on one of their shows, and it's so rowdy. I don't think they play to a click or anything, and their drummer is just like super tight. They're super old school with their setup, which is awesome. I love seeing stuff like that in a genre that is kind of filled with technology. Like we are a band that require a backing track and everything, and everything being synced to a click. When you see the Acacia Strain just rock up and just play the music the way that people used to do, I think it's so hard, dude. Like, yeah. It's sick.
And I love this pick too, because I really appreciate bands that are willing to kind of like broaden their horizons and evolve and experiment, and the Acacia Strain definitely is doing that with like their latest releases. Just going in all sorts of weird and interesting directions, not always ones that I love as much, but just the fact that they're doing that like is something that means a lot to me, because sometimes like this genre you can kind of like lock yourself in a box, and that's also something I appreciate about Within Destruction too, is that each of the albums kind of sounds a little bit different, especially Yokai, which is why I'm also very interested to hear the newer material and see kind of where y'all go from there, because it's just like I like the unpredictable. I like it when bands do something different, even if this experimentation doesn't work as well as the last one.
I think for me, like Wormwood was just something that really stood out to me. For me, the songs on that album just stuck out to me the most. And it was just aggressive, dude. It was just a whole aggressive album. Jonestown is on that album, and that one's an absolute banger. Yeah, I can go off with these songs, dude, but
well, and when you close the album with a song called Tactical Nuke, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into too.
Yeah, and that's like this. You know how there's that whole trope within the genre where you play a riff and then you play it again, but it's slower. And because it's slower, it's just like way heavier. Dude, they did not care. All right, let's just do this one song where we just drop the tempo every repetition, and we'll just do this for like 3 minutes. It's sick.
It is.
They do it live too. Like when I saw them, they played that shit live, and it was crazy. The next one is Despised Icon, Ills of Modern Man. They have two vocalists, and at the time when I first was listening to the genre and I first like heard of them, having two vocalists was like a totally new thing for me. Like I didn't know that bands can do that. I had no idea what to expect, but it's so cool because they both have such distinct vocal styles, right? Like one of the vocalists comes from a more hardcore background, so I think he's got another band called Obey the Brave, and it's just straight up like hardcore, metalcore even maybe, but it's more of that yelling vocals, where the other guy has that, straight up death metal deathcore, yeah. Pig squeals, guttural. And I think it's so cool that if you think about deathcore, like death metal, hardcore, like that's it, right? That's really just when it comes to vocal styles, like blending those two, they just complement each other really well. And the balance is really good. Aside from the vocal work, I would say that instrumentally they're like totally next level, right? The guitar work, and also the drums on this album, totally insane. And when they play live, I don't think they trigger the snare, or I don't know if I'm correct on this or not, but I think people have talked about it, and I've seen footage, and it's really old school when it comes to that. It's very like old school death metal, because you can hear when he's like doing the gravity blast that they're softer. They're not like, it's not like max velocity, which is like not.
There's no studio magic there.
Exactly. So it's really raw. It's probably different in the studio. I'm not sure, but yeah, that whole album just introduced me to the world of Despised Icon. It's just insane. Like I think this band is just like a really good definition, or like a staple in the genre when it comes to deathcore. And it, you know, being a guitarist, the musicianship on that is also next level. So that's why I put that band in there.
Something I really appreciated too about your list as I was kind of looking over it is the variety. I think some people who are kind of outside of the genre and are still kind of like, I don't know about that, like they have some hesitancy about it for various reasons. I feel like they tend to think it's like this just one thing. But really, that's not true of any genre, right? And I think especially deathcore, I mean, even just the ones we've talked about so far, all sound completely different in my mind. Like Despised Icon's a little bit more OG. They were kind of like doing deathcore before like that term was even necessarily like in the zeitgeist. Like it wasn't necessarily like a huge thing yet. And they're more just like you said, raw, lots of death metal influence on this one, versus Emmure, which is like a lot more groove, a lot more kind of like studio polish, a lot more modern sounding. Then you got the Acacia Strain, who I feel like have a lot more of that hardcore influence to their sound in terms of where they're coming from.
Yeah, it's really cool seeing just the timeline of, you know, where these bands are from, and how drastically production makes your overall vibe different, and just the overall style. And yeah, I would say I think you're totally right. Deathcore is diverse. You know, like I think it's easy to categorize a genre just being this one thing. Whereas you can really see it as more of an umbrella term for all these different like sounds. But yeah, dude, totally, I agree. We have Hate by Thy Art Is Murder. I think if you're going to, you know, talk about bands that are influential to the current deathcore groupings of bands, I think you really do have to incorporate Thy Art Is Murder. I think this album really introduced me to this kind of raw death metal style of riffing, but also that modern production, you know, like they really do have that dark ambience in their music, and just in terms of a vibe, they really do create that kind of like dark, ominous feeling. And CJ's obviously, you know, a great vocalist. And yeah, in terms of Hate, dude, it's just one of those albums that really slap.
Yeah.
You know, like every single one has amazing hooks. Like every single song has like massive breakdowns. Like just think about how many times you've heard, you know, Reign of Darkness or something, you know, just insane breakdowns. And I think that was one of the bands that really introduced me to, they do a lot of like kind of like triplet chugs, gallops and stuff like that inside their breakdowns, and it's just so clean and so precise. So yeah, it was just really modern production on that one. And I think previously their older stuff definitely more on the raw end of production. And yeah, dude, like this was just like such a banger of an album.
It sounds massive. Like it really does just sort of surround you. It fits the album cover with this big like kaiju type creature on it. And I see this come up in so many people's lists, and on our Discord too. I feel like it gets recommended like almost weekly to people as we're chatting. It comes up quite a bit, and it seems like for good reasons. So absolutely,
totally.
agree with
And
this one.
like the name Hate.
Yeah, Hate. Simple,
dude,
effective.
Wow.
Talk
Like,
about just like nailing it with one word.
Yeah, if that's not the hardest name for an album, like, I don't know what is, dude. What's up next? We have Brand of Sacrifice, Lifeblood.
Big
Exactly,
fan.
dude. Like you already know what's up. I just love good production, you know, when it comes to synth work. And that's actually something that's been different for me because previously I I never really gravitated towards synths and productions. I kind of like that more I used to like that more raw you know, standard guitar, bass, and drums. I grew up listening to like Cannibal Corpse and like, you know, Suffocation and just more of that old death metal when it comes to stuff like that. So synths and just like production was just never really on my mind until, you know, writing music and kind of being able to experiment with that a little bit more and just kind of understanding the impact that that stuff has on your music. And I think Lifeblood is just a really great example of how something as simple as, you know, I don't know, maybe like a breakdown or something, you know, just a simple chuggy breakdown. Because like, to be honest, like stuff like that, it is simple. However, when you add elements like choirs, synths, and strings, it just like elevates it to a whole nother thing. You just introduce a totally new level to it. And I mean, they've always done this, and I know a lot of bands in the past have done this, and it's not anything new. But I think they just found like the perfect balance between really great production and really good, you know, riffing, songwriting. Totally a fan of that band. Like, yeah,
They're one of my modern favorites. As I was saying before we started, like they're just like absolutely killing it with their sound. Talk about massive sound. Like this is just, it's insane. Like there's really nothing on their level in my opinion when it comes to that, and especially with the synth work. Like I love how they combine the little breaks in the music. Like I think it's on, I can't remember if it's on the title track. It was on one of the ones that had a music video, and there's that like break in the music, the guitar cuts out and those chorals come in with like the chanting, and then the riff
yeah,
and the vocals come back in. And every time I hear moments like that, like I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Like I live
yeah.
for those like signature moments where, especially the first time I hear it, I'm just like, holy shit, like what was that?
Uh-huh.
Like that just came out of
Uh,
nowhere. So good.
are you
There's
talking
so
about
many
the
good
da,
songs
da,
though.
da,
Yeah.
da, 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 da,
Yeah,
da,
that's the
da?
one. That's the one.
Yeah.
I love that part. That's
It's
probably my favorite part of
what
the
a
album, but there's so
moment.
many. So many
Yeah, and
moments.
they do these like little they just know how to utilize production. I know I forgot which song it was. Maybe it was Demon King or Lifeblood, but they will take, you know, clips of recorded elements like maybe like Kyle's vocals or something and use it as a riser. I was watching a video from their studio. They made like a studio documentary or something. Their guitarist was describing some of the production that he was doing, and he would literally take Kyle's vocals and just create a riser out of it. And in like EDM, you know, and electronic music, risers are usually like, you know, that swelling up before you get to an impact, and it creates that tension and release that really makes the music just more impactful. And just like watching him talk about that and showing the example of it is just like, wow, like why didn't I think about that? Like I've just been using like riser sounds that I find here and there and putting it into my session. Like why don't I try to make, you know, pitch shift stuff myself and see what comes out of that? Just the creativity, you know, of those guys, it's just mind blowing. And not like, this isn't even talking about their guitar work, dude. Like their guitar work is also just, we were talking about Josh Travis earlier, and just you know, things that have to do with crazy guitar work. I think for me personally, writing yokai and the newer stuff that's coming out, like that's a big influence on me. A lot of
I
whammies,
was
a lot of dissonant, you know, and just like kind of just placing them wherever you want to place them,
yeah.
like not necessarily worrying about how you're gonna play that live, because when you play that live, you're gonna figure it out, right? But just like kind of prioritizing how this one section is, and if you want to put in this like insane like 2 octave rise in like in like this kind of like discorded chord or whatever, you can do it. That
Absolutely.
band is really important when it comes to like my own guitar playing.
Yeah, and
So yeah, dude, totally.
I was curious too while you were talking, like how much, in addition to that, does the what you were talking about, production and like synth work and stuff. Are we going to see any of those influences seep into any of the new material too, or are we going a different direction than that?
I would say more than ever, production work is kind of more on the front lines here. When it comes to songwriting, it's something that I really think about because I like to write everything with production in mind, or at least try some production with parts that I create, just so I can, understand like the potential of certain parts, or what vibes these parts can have. A part with a specific like synth sound is going to sound totally different if you replace that and like put like a choir on it or something. Just like playing around with these different elements creates just totally different vibes, and depending on what you're going for specific songs, I think production is very important.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I would say absolutely, man. Like,
cool.
When it comes to production, the newest stuff is definitely up there.
Well, I'm stoked. Now I was already excited, but I can't wait to hear the newer stuff.
Hell yeah. So the next one and the last one on the list that I have is Reflections, The Color Clear. We are nothing but illusions, lost inside our delusions. Whether or not these guys are deathcore is debatable, but I mean, I'll call it deathcore. It doesn't matter. I don't care. The Color Clear specifically is super unique. I think in terms of like the whole album just has this kind of somber and like dark atmosphere that just lingers throughout the whole thing. And I was a fan of Reflections before. They're kind of more from that like genty, that genty circle of bands. They managed to create songs that were kind of more accessible in terms of like a structural basis, and maybe in terms of complexity. However, it is still technical, because if you really listen to some parts, like it's insane. It's like super. It's really hard to play. But that's not the focus anymore. I think I tend to gravitate to stuff that is more like accessible, however it uses different elements to create nuance and technicality. And this album for me was kind of like that. Yeah, that's what I got to say about this one.
Yeah, it was an interesting pick, and one of the ones that I wasn't as familiar with. So I didn't get to listen to it all the way through, but I was intrigued by it because, like you said, it reminded me more of kind of like genty. Lots of metalcore in there, but I could definitely hear the deathcore elements on certain songs, some being heavier than others, but also like very atmospheric in ways that remind me also of like early The Plot in You on certain sections. And so I'm interested to kind of check that one out more. But and again, I can see how, again, this divergence of styles between all these, like none of these albums sound like the other album at all. And I can hear elements of all of them from just going back to Yokai. And then again, it makes me excited to hear new stuff, because I love musicians that like don't just pick from the same box every single time. Like find interesting ways to fuse a lot of different sounds together.
For sure. I obviously love like the staple bands, right? Like Suicide Silence, Whitechapel. When you think about deathcore, those are kind of the bands you think about.
Yeah.
But I just like the diversity of these different bands. And although kind of categorized under the same umbrella term, they're also unique, and I think the more genres you listen to, the more you will be exposed to things that, might inspire you in different ways. Whereas if you listen to, the same handful of bands over and over again, you'll just kind of be stuck in this echo chamber, and not necessarily be exposed to what could be out there,
Yeah, totally. And honestly, like when a band just puts out the same thing over and over again, some bands can pull it off. Like I'm always excited for a new The Black Dahlia Murder album, but you kind of know what you're going to get for the most part, right? But then like I tend to be more excited by groups that are doing something unique. I mean, speaking of Whitechapel, like I love their early stuff. I do think that those are like capstone deathcore albums. And even though I don't love their newer stuff like some people do, I totally again like respect that they're constantly like trying to reinvent themselves. They're constantly trying to deliver on something a little bit broader, a little bit different than what they put out before. And clearly they're pulling on like non-metal influences as well on stuff like Kin. And so it's just interesting to see stuff like that. And just tossing out a few of your bandmates recommendations too. We also had like Oceano with Depths, Bring Me the Horizon was on there. We had Whitechapel with This Is Exile, Suicide Silence with The Cleansing, Job for a Cowboy, Doom. Like I'm sure that would make a lot of people's lists. It was interesting on the Discord recently because we were trying to figure out like what would be the deathcore big four, and it seemed like Suicide Silence and Whitechapel are like the obvious ones. But then we were struggling to decide like who would be the other two. Despised Icon is kind of standing out, I feel like, as like one of the, again, like the OGs. Another one for me though, like I think about a lot that are also sort of, they're almost like proto deathcore, because even you see interviews with them and they never like totally related to that label, is the Red Chord.
Oh yeah, dude, I was literally thinking like, is he gonna say the Red Chord?
Great minds think alike.
Yeah. Oh man.
Plus I love like mathcore too. So to me that's like one of my favorite like kind of older school bands, even though, you know, it wasn't that long ago, but I love how they fused together kind of what would become deathcore with like a lot of that technicality and the mathcore and metalcore and all that stuff kind of coming together.
Yeah, the Red Chord just I think I've only heard like one album off theirs, but the production is also super raw, right? It's kind of just in your face gritty.
Yeah. Love it.
I feel like that band is kind of underrated. Like I wonder why not, like it isn't talked about a little bit more than it is.
Is there anything else before we end here you'd like to share about the new single? And I should be coordinating that this video will come out the same day as the new single and also the upcoming album.
Within Destruction we're kind of a band that we don't like to release the same thing over and over again. We like to, I mean, like I think that's also okay. Like if bands like find a sound, they go with it, totally cool. Like that's also what I love about a lot of like my favorite death metal bands, you know? It's like I know what I'm getting, but at the same time when I get it, like I'm satisfied because it still slaps, you know? But we just really like to experiment. I think with this new album, it's going to be it's just going to be something that fans haven't really heard from the band. And it's just, I think it is closest to where we are, musically speaking, in terms of what we like to listen to, because, you know, while we are talking about deathcore, we like all kinds of music. Like metalcore, I love metalcore. I like trap, rap. I love K-pop. We want to create things that we want to create. And I think this is a point in our career where we truly are getting the closest to what we want. I think people are really going to like it, man. Like I personally love it. I think it's the best. It's the best in terms of like songwriting and in terms of like working together as a group. It was a great time doing it, and I'm really excited for it to finally be coming out.
Me too.
Yeah, dude.
Especially
April 15th.
Hearing you say it's something we haven't heard from you yet, given what we already got with Yokai, like that makes me like super, super excited. Because like that album already was like a completely kind of off the wall surprise in and of itself, I think, to a lot of people. And something that really thrilled me listening to it. Like it took me a second to kind of like adapt to like, okay, this is not Death Wish. Like this is very different from that. And I love Death Wish and I love Void, but I also love Yokai because it's just like so much interesting stuff. So it makes me very curious what direction you're going to go. Like, so you're going to put out your first Within Destruction country album? You know, what's going to happen?
We'll see,
here?
dude.
We'll
see how we feel.
I also say Poppy collab when? Like, I think that might be interesting.
Man, I would love for that to happen.
Do you have any bucket list collaborations that you would love to do?
I would say anything with any member of Blackpink, like City Morgue, Suicide Boys. I think
Okay.
those would definitely go along because trap metal is a thing
Yeah,
now.
yeah. It's big now.
Yeah, but in terms of like just really great vocalists, I would love to see Maggie Lindemann on a track, Madison Beer on a track. Just like stuff that I like, but maybe it will work, maybe it won't, but we're gonna give it a go. Like I wish that was just more of a thing, and I feel like it is becoming a thing, right? Like
Yeah.
we just had a song with Ed Sheeran and Bring Me the Horizon. Like who thought
Yeah. Yeah.
that was gonna happen?
Yeah. And
So
I know some of the kind of like the people who have sort of dug their heels in that want things to kind of stay the same kind of poo-poo that, but like for me,
yeah,
and I feel like for the good of the scene, really, like I think the only direction is forwards. Like that's where all the
totally,
cool shit is happening, in my opinion. Whereas if we just stay stuck in what we've been doing, then that's just boring to me. So yeah.
totally. And I'm such a fan of people from maybe the pop world or like the hip hop world getting into the metal world, because all you're doing is just you're creating a funnel for more people to be
Exactly.
exposed to this genre. And it's a win for us. Like if more people are listening to heavy music through collaborations with pop artists that are just undeniably bigger, like what's the harm in
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I think that's the way to go. This whole gatekeeping shit is not helping.
No, it's
You know,
not. It's not. I know some people think it is because they're like, we don't want to dilute the serum or whatever. But I'm like, dude, like even with these artists coming in, you still have like your Deathspell Omegas and stuff that are going to stay the same and not stay the same, but do their own dark, aggressive, like vile sounding stuff, or like
yeah,
Imperial Triumphant and things like that. And I also say like I never would have gotten to those types of bands if I hadn't started with like Linkin Park. Everybody
yeah,
needs their like gateway to get there. So yeah, I think you and
totally.
I are totally on the same wavelength with this.
Hell yeah, yeah, man, 100%.
Y'all check out this video for more best of a genre lists and let me know down in the comments what are your favorite deathcore albums. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.